this comes as Israel has just indicted an Israeli man from the central city of Ramat Gan for being paid $12,000 in crypto by the Islamic Republic to hang up posters calling for a military coup. The 30-year-old, who has been identified as Eden Debs, allegedly knew that an Iranian agent was asking him to carry out the job. His arrest follows a string of similar cases in recent months. And joining us now on Zoom is Behnam Ben Taleblu, a senior fellow with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He's in Australia. Let's begin with Iran's threats against Israel. Of course, at this point, the question is, what can we expect?
Great to be with you, Natasha. It's a great question because, in essence, the Islamic Republic is advancing several strategies at once. There's a political strategy, but there's also a psychological strategy. And that psychological strategy is to keep this steady drip about commenting about the nature of a potential response, the right of a potential response, and even previous comments by Iran's supreme leader. And that's a title meant to be taken rather literally, that Iran will not accept anything other than a tactical retreat. It will never do a strategic retreat. So it's trying to generate fear among the Israeli public. It's trying to generate fear among American policymakers, among Israeli policymakers who are trying to figure out if there is another overt, direct, and kinetic attack, if it's going to look like the April one, and what opportunities may exist for interception. So this is, again, as much a political weapon as a psychological weapon, but then also it feeds into Iran's larger post-October 7 Middle East strategy, which is to use military means to achieve political ends. This whole thing, this multi-front war, has been brought to by Iran's attempts to bail out Hamas, the lowest of the low-hanging fruit in terms of its axis of resistance. So here, if the regime can potentially dangle the military option while also advancing its nuclear program, it's trying to get the Biden administration, which is trying to tamp down on tensions in the region, to put the handcuffs on Israel, and then the regime will take credit for a ceasefire, essentially call themselves the champions of the defenders of Gaza.
Now, I want to speak to the second issue that we saw covered in the news today here. Iran has continued attempting to kind of turn local Israelis into agents. This is something that we've now been seeing for years, but I mean, recently in the last couple of months, there have been several cases of Israelis being reached out to via Telegram groups and essentially asked to take part in various different tasks in exchange for money. What kind of success has Iran had overall in cases like this?
There's capability, but there's also intent. The Islamic Republic is looking for a soft underbelly that could come out from some sort of cyber outreach, from some sort of disinformation or misinformation campaign. But ultimately, as you see, a trend line is emerging. Some kind of outreach on Telegram, some kind of promise on financial compensation via cryptocurrency, and either the desire to instigate violence in Israel or to set up a series of events that could lead to violence in Israel. So even though Israeli security forces and law enforcement agencies have been successful thus far in terms of thwarting these things, and that's at least what's been publicly reported in the English language Israeli press, this is the Islamic Republic trying to strike back and really in some way atone for the track record, you could say a decade or a decade and a half of embarrassment on the home front about cyber, about sabotage, about kinetic actions like assassination. So this is a regime that has a high degree of intent, even though in the very short term, when it comes to transnational criminal syndicates, it has not matched capability with that intent.
Right. All right. Behnam Ben Taleblu, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us in the studio with some insight as to where Iran stands in this given moment. Obviously, a lot of the country very much feels in limbo, not really understanding when we're going to see that attack, but part of the psychological warfare, as you mentioned.